Welcome once again to another edition of Quoth the Raven, Louis Brightraven. I'm your host, Louis Brightraven, 29-year veteran writer, illustrator, and editor of science fiction, fantasy, horror, comics, and role-playing games. This is Saturday, October 23rd, 2021, day 23 of Booktober 2021. And our book today, I thought I had it right by, I guess I don't. It's Press Start to Play anthology series, edited by Daniel H. Wilson and John Joseph Adams. Let's take a look at it. Press Start to Play was $15.95 United States dollars. Publisher is Vintage Books, Penguin Random House, with writers Daniel H. Wilson, Charles Wu, Hiroshi Sakurazaka, S.R. Mastrantone, Charlie Jane Anders, Holly Black, I don't know if it's Seaman or Shannon McGuire, Dango Wexler, Nicole Feldringer, Chris Avalone, David Barr Kirtley, T.C. Boyle, Mark Laidlaw, Robin Wasserman, Mickey Nielsen, Corey Doctorow, Jessica Barber, Marguerite K. Bennett, Chris Cluey, Rihanna Pratchett, Austin Grossman, Yoon Ha Lee, Ken Liu, Catherine M. Vellante, Andy Weir, and Hugh Howey. Edited, of course, like I said, by Daniel Wilson and John Joseph Adams. This is a science fiction anthology that was released in August of 2018. A lot of writers, a lot of stories, 26 to be exact. What it's about. Video games are a multi-billion-dollar-a-year industry that has outpaced movies and books combined. The humble, pixelated games of the 70s and 80s have evolved into the vivid, realistic, and immersive form of entertainment that now rivals all other forms of media entertainment for dominance in the consumer marketplace. For many people, video games have become the cultural icons around which pop culture revolves. Press Start to Play is an anthology of stories inspired by video games. Stories that attempt to recreate the feel of a video game in prose form, stories that play with the concepts common or exclusive to video games, and stories about the creation of video games and or about the video games or the gamers themselves. These stories will appeal to anyone who has interacted with games, from hardcore teenage fanatics to men and women who game after their children have gone to bed, to your well-meaning aunt who won't stop inviting you to join her farm-based Facebook game. That's their pitch, anyway. Let's talk about the stories. Like I said, there's a lot of stories, so we'll go in a quick thing about them. God Mode by Daniel H. Wilson starts the story. It's not a particularly strong opening book. It's or opening story, I should say. It's about a character who basically is overseeing something that's going on in the story, and the observations and what they're interacting with doesn't make a lot of sense until the reveal moment at the end, which is kind of obvious from the title, which means it's just about to get interesting. Then the story is over. But it's one of the stories I wouldn't have really included in this, but he is one of the co-editors, so there you go. NPC by Charles Yu is a nice story about a guy who suddenly finds himself powered up after a cosmic-type incident and the subsequent change or lack of change in the way he feels about himself, his role in the universe, and his fellow human beings. I like this much better than Wilson's first story, even though they're similar type stories. The next story was Respawn by Hiroshi Sakurazaka. Now, this was interesting and one of the stronger stories in the book. It's about a simple man with simple pleasures who is killed and finds his personality has been imported into the body of his killer. There's a lot of subtlety, and there's dealings with some really interesting themes and ideas in that particular story. One of the better stories in the work. There is Desert Walk by S.R. Mastrantone. Now, that's an awesome story about the most boring game ever. You'll walk through the desert, and every 4 hours you might see a bush or something if you're lucky. But everything is individually coded and not just repeating over and over, which means there could be something out there to discover or something change that you got to pay attention to and make notice of so that you can move forward in the game. It captures that concept of grinding at a game at its most basic but intense sensibility, which is kind of like the same metaphor for the grind of the daily grind of your life. You go do your same routine daily, in and out, day after day, and you lose your perceptions of the world around you, but you got to pay better close attention to the world around you, because if you don't, you might miss something important that'll change your whole life because you missed it. Anyway, it does that, and then it shoots off in a totally different direction that most readers will not see coming. The next story is Ratcatcher's Yellows by Charlie Jane Anders. This is about a disease that spreads through society that's a form of dementia. But for some reason, many of these people who get this disease find solace playing a game where cats rule their own kingdoms, and a caregiver or carer must decide between the hopes they have for their patient, the kid, and the reality of the unreal situation. In other words, the caregiver has to decide between the hopes they have for the patient who's suffering from the dementia versus the reality of being in this cat kingdom. Do they want to take the device away from them where it might just break them, or do you want to let them live in the cat realm if you were with their dementia, but they're still functional to that level of degree? Anyway, it's a really good story. The next story is One Up by Holly Black. The friends of a recently deceased young man find a game at his funeral, and they must play the game in real time to unlock the mystery of his murder. Excellent story by Miss Black. One of the best stories in the book. The next story is Survival Horror by Sinan McGuire. Two kids get trapped in their bedroom / another dimension while playing a newly installed game. This is one of the weaker stories in the book, as it's based off of McGuire's Encrypted book series. So if you're not familiar with that series, you're going to get lost in that particular story because there's just not enough time to get everything that you need to know in there. The next story is Real by Dango Wexler. It's about a journalist who tracks down the somewhat mythological creator of a game that was never officially released, and it's played by those who think it's actually real. It's a networked phone game that identifies demons who have invaded Earth and glowing runes on walls that make the player feel truly involved. It's a very strong premise, well executed, has a very nice twist ending. One of the better stories in the book. Outliers by Nicole Feldringer. A woman plays a game that tracks weather patterns instead of going to her brother's wedding. There's a lot of techno jargon in the story, and it's difficult to have any connection to that lead character given that she's willing to pass up a family wedding to play a video game. It's one of the weaker stories, probably the weakest story in the book, actually. There's Endgame by Chris Avallone. The first of a number of text-based game stories in the book. It has many repeating not phases, but phrases over and over, and there's some interesting bits from the point of view of the character in the game. A very interesting execution using the idea behind text-based games, but unfortunately, all of the suspense that is built up throughout the story it peters out at the end, and you just have, okay, and the next story is Save Me PLZ, or Please, by David Barr Kirtley. What if the boundaries between game and reality were blurred and someone eventually figured out how to make them bleed together? This is a sweet little story. It starts with a young woman named Meg getting into her car to find her ex-boyfriend Devin. The real world and virtual world collide as she is tasked to embark on a quest to rescue him. That's one of the stronger stories in the book as well. The Relive Bot by T.C. Boyle. is the next story. A father and daughter who have lost their wife and mother must try and live on without her as the father obsesses over an invention that gives the ability to relive your memories, so to speak, and he can't let go of the past. It hits hard because it's a realistic thing that happens in real life for people when they lose a loved one, and they can't let go, even though they got to try and live, and they got to take care of their other surviving members of their family, or you got to move on with life at work or whatever, and you just can't seem to move past a certain traumatic experience. And it's not just a death of a loved one in this case, although that's there as well. Any traumatic thing like a loss of a home to a fire, or just certain things that happen that can hit you hard, that gives you kind of a post-traumatic stress syndrome type thing. Very relatable, in my opinion, if anybody who's ever experienced anything like that. The next story is Roguelike from Mark Laidlaw. It's repetitive and simple, but it's hilarious. Again, this is another one of the stories that makes use of a text-based game format to tell a little tale about a very persistent resistance and the fates of all the attempts played of trying to get where they need to get to. And with death at every turn, each action must be played out over and over again until the right combination actions is stumbled over to win the game. And the story reads like an elaborate joke, but you gotta love the punchline when they get to the end of the story. Mm-hmm. The next story is all of the people in your party have died, by Robin Wasserman. This is about a teacher who becomes obsessed with the old video game Oregon Trail and notices parallels between her own life and the game when she must leave those behind her to get where she needs to be in life. It's a cute story, but you really have to be pretty darn old to remember the old game Oregon Trail to really get the connections that are being made, in my opinion. Recoil by Mickey Nielsen. This is one of the more complete and coherent stories in the collection, and the author creates a very suspenseful atmosphere to boot. Jimmy is our protagonist, staying late at the office to test a new video game, but suddenly finds himself in a terrorist hostage situation. It doesn't go where you think it might go either, which is a nice twist on the story, and it keeps you engaged. And this game by Cory Doctorow, it's a look at the world of the industrialization of gaming and the industry of gaming and the click group hierarchy within the gamer community. Anda, our lead character, joins a band of elite girl gamers and kicks ass in the virtual world, but in real life she's an average and unassuming schoolgirl. Her online teammates are everything to her, but when something happens that might jeopardize all her newfound happiness, because she finds herself questioning the missions her clan are fighting when someone from the side of their victims manages to get some communication through to let her know what kind of damage they're actually doing. This is kind of typical doctoral writing. This is his shtick, and so it's got the typical self-reliance, stand for what you believe in over the group mentality, sheep mentality thing going on. So if you like doctoral, you'll like this. If you're not into that kind of storytelling, this is not going to be your one of your preferred stories. The next story is Coma Kings by Jessica Barber. Coma is a game that you plug into that involves you building structures in a competition. The winner seeks to destroy the other's construct, and this is a very popular game with a big craze for it. But there's these two sisters who are extraordinarily talented players, but one of them has gone so far as to have the game implanted directly into the brain, which puts them in a vegetable-like state, a coma, if you will. Their consciousness only exists in the game, and the other sister has to try and get into the game and convince her to come out in order to save her life. That's a good story because it's about wanting to escape the pressures and everything in reality and living in this one thing over here, like virtual reality life. Well done by Barber. The next story is Stats by Marguerite K. Bennett. That is the comics writer, for those of you who might be wondering. And I don't like her comics writing. Well, I don't like her prose fiction either. This is about a man who finds himself in a really weird situation when someone begins messing with his real life stats. It's dorky. It's got a bad premise. It's typical Bennett writing. Blah. Next story. Please Continue by Chris Cluey. A young man rises up through the ranks of the players, but sees the finish lose its luster and ends up telling us all to just go out and get a real life. Really? Is that what we really want to read in this kind of thing? It was just kind of like this. I don't know. It felt like it's just a bad story. It feels like something that I would write in a junior high class for a creative writing class in high school or junior high school, not something that really is professional grade level in terms of concept. The next story is Creation Stream by Rihanna Pratchett. A character is created who seems to have the soul of a condescending and disapproving mother as she proceeds to lecture the reader on how their life is wasted in front of a screen and that the deeds achieved in the game mean nothing in real life. It's another back-to-back right after Please Continue, though this one is much better executed than Please Continue. But no. The next story is The Fresh Prince of Gamma World by Austin Grossman, in which a gamer gets transported to an alternate world which has experienced a nuclear apocalypse. Gamma World, like the TSR board game. I'm not sure if there was ever a video game for it. Maybe there was. I don't remember ever hearing about it. The story is dull. If you're not familiar with the Gamma World franchise and the world behind that, you probably won't get it, even though it's sort of supposed to be funny and play into the tropes of both Gamma World and Fresh Prince and stuff. It's just kind of there. Gamers In by Yoon-Ha Lee is the next story. It's basically a war games situation, video game training story. Only it's you're training virtual reality, but are you actually training or are you killing real people in real life? It's kind of a weird thing. It's nothing special. It's just there. Mark Andrew Smith's on. He says, that's kind of lame when people do a short to push their own projects. A little bit. Yeah, it's an interesting anthology, and there's a good pitches for stuff like that, like you say. Yep, definitely a generic winch raw. Yeah, there you go. That's a way on the doctoral. It's just normal, typical thing. Let's see what else we got here. We got The Clockwork Soldier by Ken Liu. Alex is a female bounty hunter who captures a runaway named Ryder to bring back to his family. It's another one that uses text-based gaming premise, but it's philosophically deeper than the other ones that are text-based, and probably one of the more philosophically deeper stories in the book. That one's a little bit higher level story. The next one is Kill Switch by Catherine M. Vellante. In this story, Kill Switch is a game that starts off like any other first-person adventure game, but it doesn't end that way. What I liked about this story is that it has something to say about games versus real life, about only having one shot, one chance to experience a moment before it becomes just a memory. And Valenti tries very hard to carry the narrative, but the style that she's writing in gets a little bit jarring at times. You'll get the idea of what she's trying to get across, but to me, it's just slightly off target, in my opinion. But it's still kind of an above-average story in the overall book. The next one is T-Warrior or Twarrior by Andy Weir. It's about a kid who creates a program and tells it to go learn some shit and get back to him. And that's pretty much what it says. Go learn some shit. A billion cycles later, this is what they call it, a billion cycles later. However many cycles that is, I don't know. But and basically the program comes back and starts talking to him, but it infects every known computer system on the planet, and it's wicked smart, so it's basically going to take over the planet effectively because it went and learned some shit. This feels more like a snippet or an intro to a much larger story. It doesn't feel entirely complete. Like Mark suggests, it's more like a good pitch for a screenplay jump point idea than an actual story to me. That was a great point. I'll even reshare it again. Like I said, screenplay jump point idea. That's about what it is to me. Select Characters, the final story by Hugh Howey, and explores that wonderful urban legend that if you do well enough in a game, the army or special, CIA or the FBI or somebody is going to call you and recruit you. But it has a very different twist. It's a very enjoyable story showing how different people approach video games, and it reminds me a lot of conversations that I've had with others about different gameplay styles. Not so much in video gaming, but for me, it was more like the traditional pen and paper role playing. But I'm sure that it carries over to the video game world because we've got so many games that have teams that you got to play together to win and compete against each other online. So as teams, so I'm sure that it plays in the same wheelhouse. Sometimes when you only play a certain way that and that you excel at, you're going to miss things that you'd never have thought of or never known until you talk to someone else who has a completely different perspective about how to approach the game. That might be beneficial to you. So that's kind of what that story is about. Ultimately, what do I think about this? Well, as with most anthologies, it's a mixed bag. I think the stories skew more towards an older readership and doesn't necessarily reflect the modern gamer mentality because there's certain things like the Oregon Trail, Gamma World, things like that. I mean, there is some people who know some of that stuff that are younger, but a lot of this stuff is geared more towards my age group in the mid to late 40s. That's not really something that I think would appeal to teenage gamers today. So I'm not really sure that they would enjoy this book the same way that older gamer readers might. I also think this book could have been shorter. A few stories really didn't make the grade. Notably, Stats, Please Continue, and Outliers were three that I really didn't think really didn't belong in the book. The other ones did for the most part, but I could easily cut those three and maybe one or two more. But there usually are 2 to 4 stories in any given anthology that the average person doesn't care for. So I look at it as other readers might like those stories and find other stories in this anthology not to their interests or tastes. Overall, it's a respectable enough anthology and worth your time and money invested. I recommend it for ages 16 and up. I give it 3.5 stars. Now, tomorrow's book will be Swamp Thing, Roots of Terror, Deluxe Edition Collection, a variety of stories from different eras of Swamp Thing. And I will see you guys tomorrow afternoon for that. But tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern, there'll be movie weekend reviews, horror week 1 of 2, and we're going to get catty with the cat people. We're going to talk about the original Cat People from 1942, starring Simone Simon, Ken Smith, Jane Randolph, and others. And then we're going to talk about The Curse of the Cat People, which also featured Simone Simon, Ken Smith, and Jane Randolph, among others, which is a sequel. It's a sequel, but it's not a sequel. You'll understand when I talk about it. And we're going to talk about the 1982 remake of Cat People featuring Natasha Kinski. That is tonight at 10 p.m. And there you have it for today's show. We'll see you guys later this evening. In the meantime, if you like this video, or you think others might, please hit the like, share, and subscribe buttons to continue to get content from this channel. As always, I thank you for watching and for your support. If you want to reach out to me on social media, I'm on Facebook at Lewis.BrightRaven and Twitter at LewisBrightRaven2. You can see some of my artwork at deviantart.com/BrightRaven. You've been watching Quoth the Raven, Lewis Brightraven, exclusively on YouTube. If you have questions, comments, suggestions for topics of discussion in future episodes, or you want to request a commission artwork or something of the other possible topics of discussion, reach out to me at quoththeravenlbr72@gmail.com. And if I don't get back to you within a day or so, try lewisbrightraven@yahoo.com. That's all for now. We will see you later this evening at 10 p.m. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.